Queers, SJWs, and feminists will never be happy. Constant turmoil. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I've made a number of videos in relation to this subject, but I've never really articulated why exactly I decided to completely exit the queer scene, which is actually just code word for fourth wave intersectional feminists more and more these days. There's countless specific things that have happened which I have touched on in numerous videos, but the overall theme is this. I realized after repeated arguments that absolutely could not be resolved that the grievances of fourth wave intersectional feminist social justice warrior or queer type people were grievances that could not be satisfied. It is literally impossible to please these people, as their entire existence has become a perpetual game of finding things to be offended by, because being dissatisfied in itself has become a means to an end for various people in positions of power. Some of these people have power over only a handful of friends, and some of these people are quite powerful politically, but being perpetually dissatisfied will always be profitable for a select few. You see, the game has never been about getting to a point where everybody is treating other people with respect, or even giving people the proper guidebook on how to successfully walk on eggshells in a game that has unfair rules to begin with. Rather, the purpose of the SJW mentality, from the best of my understanding, is actually just to completely disarm people intellectually and rob them of their independent decision-making. It sounds a bit conspiratorial, but if people are told that they cannot do anything right over and over and over, then they'll retreat basically from doing anything at all, at least intellectually, in an effort to not offend their superior in the hierarchy. This is plainly evident when you see cis white SJWs saying things like, "I don't feel that it is appropriate for me to have an opinion on this because," etc., etc. Meanwhile, they are more than willing to shout down others who do have opinions, if it is the wrong opinion. One would think that because of this hierarchy, the black lesbians in wheelchairs must live some sort of privileged, happy life. But in reality, that isn't true, because even the black lesbians in wheelchairs are only seen as virtuous so long as they can convince their underlings that they are victims at all times, and therefore worthy of taking orders from. If a black person, trans person, or disabled person is strong and does not use their hardships in life as an excuse to gain leverage in arguments, they are generally not followed around by the social justice types, or they might even be called a traitor. That all said, the entire SJW ideology that demands people to be ever searching for the ultimate preachy victim to take orders from will always lead to endless competition and endless infighting. And I was seeing that years ago. It was very obvious that these people did not want their friend circles to be harmonious and having fun together. What they wanted was subservience to whomever was the most oppressed in the room, who was likely being enabled by some sort of activist leader, or blog at least, that was pushing them to believe that they have the right to order everybody around, when in reality, that whiny, oppressed SJW was actually being used by the leader so that this leader could avoid having to get their hands dirty. Again, with my tinfoil hat here, but it's pretty obvious if you really investigate. I mean, if you're a cisgender white woman that is the head of some government-funded feminist organization and you want to take over a LGBT pride planning board, which, by the way, has happened countless times, if you are this white female feminist trying to take over a pride parade, instead of just attempting a hostile takeover all by yourself, wouldn't it be a lot easier to convince some black, trans, insecure lesbian in a wheelchair that they are being shafted by the Pride Festival every year? Get that black lesbian in a wheelchair full of resentment towards the white male patriarchy and have her demand that the Pride Planning Board no longer be led by gay white men, and that instead they take an intersectional approach to conducting Pride. And of course, the way to solve that problem would be to put the intersectional feminist organization at the top of the pyramid. The Intersectional Feminist Organization, which is headed by a cisgender white woman, of course, but since she works with the black trans lesbian in the wheelchair, who she took under her wing to make noise so that she didn't have to, it now looks like there is more leadership from black trans people in wheelchairs, even if, ultimately, on the top of the pyramid is just a white feminist. As usual. You see, when queer simply meant a wide variety of LGBT type people unified into a single word, I was perfectly fine with that. But then, when it changed to have this inherent intersectional feminist connotation, things started getting weird. To define oneself as queer ended up meaning that you were basically telling people forthright that you followed a certain specific set of rules. Those rules of intersectionality, and that you were ready and willing to be judged as an individual based on how well or how poorly you followed these rules. And if you messed up, you were open to quote-unquote accountability, which actually generally just means public shaming or excommunication from the queer scene. Ultimately, though it looks like the black lesbians in wheelchairs are supposed to be in charge of this system of rules, there are no individual people who will ever be safe because the system of language policing and random allegations of community violations are ever expansive, leading to constant power struggles and social sabotage, as everybody will inevitably eat each other like starving piranhas, which is what happens when the thing bringing people together is not a specific environment that they want to live in, but rather the exclusion of everything they don't want around them. They ideally don't want straight people around, don't want cis people, don't want men, don't want white people, don't want microaggressions, don't want oppressive language, don't want ableism, don't want fat phobia. I do believe this ideology was deliberately at least fed by the Democratic Party by way of them giving money to propaganda blogs like Everyday Feminism with the goal of getting Hillary Clinton into office, which would have had its own mammoth set of problems by way of relentless Orwellian censorship. But now that the DNC has failed, it's like the SJW demographic is running around like a chicken with its head cut off. And it seems to only be attacking each other because they aren't organized or well-funded enough to form a mob to attack anybody else, which is fortunate. They're also outnumbered. As the saying goes, live by the SJW sword, die by the SJW sword. That's all I have to say for this video. Drop me a comment, help me out on Patreon if you want more from me, hit the bell button so you don't get unsubscribed. It's next to the subscribe button because people keep getting unsubscribed, and stay tuned.